The rain hit the city hard that morning. Cold drops splashed on the streets, turning the sidewalks into puddles of silver. People rushed through the transport hub, holding umbrellas or hiding under hoods. No one stopped. No one cared. At the corner, near the bus stop, a small figure stood alone, completely still. She was an alien woman, not taller than a child. Her skin was soft gray, her eyes glowing faintly silver, and her robe was old and torn at the bottom. She held no bag, no umbrella, just silence. Most people didn't even notice her. Those who did gave her dirty looks or laughed softly behind her back. Some whispered things like "too short to be useful," or "must be one of those useless breeds." One large alien bumped into her on purpose, knocking her off balance. She didn't react. She just stood there again, as if she was used to it. A human bus driver named Carl pulled up in his big red bus. He had been working the same route for 8 years. He'd seen all kinds of people, but something about this little alien made him pause. She didn't beg. She didn't speak. She just waited. When the doors of the bus opened, people pushed each other to get in. Carl saw her try to move forward, but taller passengers shoved past her. One alien even blocked her path on purpose, grinning. Carl frowned. He stood up and stepped outside. "Hey," he said gently, holding out his hand toward her. "You riding?" She looked up. Her silver eyes locked onto his. There was no fear in her eyes, just quiet strength. "Yes," she said softly, in clear English. "You don't need a ticket today," Carl said, ignoring the angry looks from the crowd. "Come on in." She nodded once and stepped into the bus. People moved away from her. No one wanted to sit near the short alien. She walked to the back and sat alone, placing her hands quietly on her lap. Carl returned to his seat and started driving again, but his mind was stuck on her. He'd driven rich aliens, rude aliens, even violent ones, but none had eyes like hers, eyes that had seen something dark. When he looked through the rear mirror, he noticed something strange. On her left hand was a faint scar. It wasn't just a burn. It looked like a brand. Like something official, maybe military. The shape was odd, like a triangle wrapped in a circle. Carl tried not to stare, but curiosity burned in his chest. Who was she? They reached the city center. Most passengers got off. Only the short alien stayed. Carl drove to the final stop, an old area filled with broken buildings and half-functioning streetlights. She stood and walked to the door. "Thanks for the ride," she said, voice low. "No problem," Carl replied. "What's your name?" She paused for a second, then gave a tiny smile. "You can call me Tali." "Tali," Carl repeated. "Nice name." She nodded and stepped out into the misty street. Just as she walked away, Carl saw 2 men watching her from the shadows. They were not regular people. Their eyes followed her too closely. One of them whispered something into a wrist communicator. Carl's gut twisted. He had seen enough in life to know one thing. Tali was not just a short alien. She was being watched, hunted maybe, or worse, feared, and whatever she was hiding, it wasn't small. Carl didn't know why, but he felt a strange need to protect her. Maybe because no one else did. Maybe because in a world full of noise, her silence spoke the loudest. As he drove away, he looked into the mirror one last time and whispered to himself, "She's not just small. She's hiding something big." The next day, the city looked the same. Gray skies, noisy streets, tired faces. But something had changed inside Carl, the bus driver. He couldn't stop thinking about the short alien woman, Tali. Her quiet voice, her silver eyes, and that strange mark on her hand. He had seen scars before, but nothing like that. When he pulled up at the same bus stop again, he looked around. She wasn't there. People boarded the bus, grumbling as always. Then, just as the doors were about to close, she appeared, walking slowly out of the mist. Same tattered robe, same calm face. She stepped into the bus without saying a word. Carl gave a small nod. She nodded back. No one noticed, but Carl felt it. A silent understanding was building between them. Each day after that, she came. Always on time. Always alone. Always silent. She sat in the same seat at the back, her hands resting on her knees, her eyes staring out the window like she was waiting for something. Carl started calling her Little Miss in his head. One day the route was quiet. No traffic, no noise. Just the hum of the engine. Tali looked up and said, "You always drive this route?" Carl glanced in the mirror. 8 years now, same streets, same stops. She tilted her head slightly. "Then you know which paths are safe." That line stayed with Carl the whole day. Why would she need to know about safe paths? Was someone chasing her? Later that week, the city faced a power outage. Streetlights flickered, and communication signals dropped. That's when things went wrong. Carl had 5 passengers that night, including Tali. Just after crossing the Sector 9 junction, 3 rough-looking aliens boarded the bus. One had a long coat, the second had cybernetic arms, and the third had a heavy bag that looked too square to be honest. Carl immediately felt danger in the air. The one with the cyber arms walked toward the passengers. "This is a simple ride," he said loudly. "Give us your credits and nobody gets hurt." The passengers panicked. One alien couple quickly handed over their money. A small boy clung to his mother. Carl reached for the emergency alert button, but it was dead. Power outage. No help would come. The thugs walked toward the back of the bus, toward Tali. "You little thing," the one with the bag sneered. "Empty your pockets." Tali stood slowly, her expression unreadable. Carl's heart raced. He was about to yell when something shocking happened. Tali moved. Not walked. Moved. Fast. Too fast. She twisted the thug's arm in one quick motion. The bag dropped to the floor. The second thug jumped forward. She kicked him straight in the knee, and a loud crack echoed in the bus. He collapsed with a cry. The third one raised a blaster, but Tali was already behind him. She jabbed something into the side of his neck, and he dropped like a rock. The bus fell silent. Carl stared in disbelief. The passengers looked frozen. Tali gently picked up the bag, opened it, and removed a small explosive device. She crushed it with her foot like it was a toy. She walked to Carl and said, "Drive. Now." He obeyed, hands still shaking on the wheel. No one spoke for the rest of the trip. When they reached the end of the route, Carl turned to her. "You trained in something?" Tali didn't smile, but her voice was soft. "I've trained in many things, but surviving, that's my best skill." She stepped off the bus as the other passengers stayed behind, speechless. Carl leaned back in his seat. For the first time in years, the bus didn't feel like just a job. It felt like something more. He knew now that this little miss wasn't helpless. She was something else, a warrior hiding in plain sight. And he was in the middle of something big, something dangerous. But deep down, he didn't want to step away. Carl couldn't sleep that night. The images replayed in his mind like an old film. Tali so small yet moving like a trained soldier. She didn't just fight. She knew exactly where to hit, when to strike, and how to stop them without killing. That kind of control didn't come from street fights. It came from experience. From war. The next day, Carl drove the same route, same corners, same potholes. He didn't say much. His eyes kept checking the mirror, waiting for her. But Tali didn't come. He waited 5 minutes, 10. Still nothing. Something felt wrong. After his shift ended, he did something he'd never done before. He parked the bus a block away and walked toward the broken part of the city where he usually dropped her off. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange. It was quiet. Too quiet. He found the alley. It was narrow, full of trash, old wires, and broken neon signs. A rusty fence sat to one side, half covered by a tarp. Behind it, he heard a soft sound, like whispering. Carl pushed the tarp aside. What he saw made his heart sink. There were children, alien children, all kinds. Some had bruises, some looked sick. One had cyber implants, damaged and smoking. They were huddled together on old mattresses and blankets. and in the center sat Tali, slicing pieces of dry food with a pocket knife. Her head turned the moment Carl stepped in. She stood instantly, ready to fight. But when she saw him, her body relaxed just a little. "You followed me," she said. "I had to," Carl replied, his voice low. "You weren't on the bus?" Tali didn't smile. She simply motioned for him to sit on a crate. One of the smaller alien kids looked at Carl with wide eyes. "He's human," the kid whispered. "He's safe," Tali said firmly. Carl looked around. "You live here?" "We all do," she replied. Every child here was rejected, left behind, not tall enough, not strong enough. Some were born with tech defects. Others were just different. Carl nodded slowly. "And you protect them?" Tali looked down. "I used to be like them." And then for the first time she told him her story. She came from a warrior race, tall, proud, brutal. But Tali was born smaller than any of them. They laughed at her. They kept her in the back lines, never trusted her with command, until a secret rebellion formed. Small ones like her, trained in secret, used for dangerous missions where their size became an advantage. They became the Ghost Unit. Quiet, fast, deadly. They were winning, until their own leaders betrayed them. The small ones were too dangerous, too unpredictable. They were hunted, marked with energy brands, and abandoned. Tali escaped, alone, injured, and she found others like her. "I don't want to fight anymore," she whispered. "I just want them to live." Carl looked at the children again. One was missing a leg. Another held a broken toy and stared at the wall like she hadn't spoken in years. "I can help," Carl said. Tali frowned. "Why?" Carl looked at her. "Because you saw them when no one else did, just like I saw you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Tali reached behind her crate and pulled out a small box. She opened it and handed Carl a tiny metal badge. It had the same triangle and a circle symbol, the one he'd seen on her hand. "What is this?" he asked. She looked him in the eyes. "It belonged to the first commander who believed in me. He died because he protected someone small, like me." Carl held the badge tight. He didn't know what he was getting into, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a bus driver and a small alien girl anymore. This was about standing up when no one else would. And Carl had just stepped into the shadows. The next morning, Carl arrived early at the depot. He didn't drink his usual coffee. He didn't joke with the other drivers. His mind was racing. He had seen something real last night, something that changed him. Tali wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was a protector, a survivor. And those kids in the alley, they needed her. And now, he had to protect them too. Carl cleaned the inside of his bus himself. He checked the brakes twice. He even tightened the loose bolts on the front mirror. He didn't know why, but something in his gut told him today wouldn't be normal. The city looked different that morning. Not on the surface. People still rushed, horns still blared, rain still drizzled. But something in the air felt tense. When Carl reached the usual stop, Tali was already there, standing still, calm, but her eyes were scanning the street. She stepped in without a word and took her place at the back. Carl nodded silently. He started the route. The first few stops were normal. But when they reached Sector 7, two strange passengers stepped in, both wearing long coats, faces half covered. One stood near the front, the other walked to the back and sat 3 rows behind Tali. Carl's hands tightened on the wheel. Something wasn't right. He looked at Tali in the mirror. She didn't move, but her silver eyes were locked on the one behind her. The bus continued. At the next stop, no one got off, but 3 more stepped in. Same style, same coats. Too quiet, too alert. Now there were 5 of them, spread across the bus, watching her. Carl spoke low without turning. "They're here for you, aren't they?" Tali answered without blinking. "Yes." Carl's heart pounded. What do they want? They want to erase what I know, she said. I wasn't supposed to survive. One of the strangers stood. He pulled out a silver scanner and pointed it at Tali. By order of the Galactic Internal Security, identify yourself. Carl slammed the brakes. The bus jerked. Passengers screamed. One alien dropped his bag. Tali stood slowly. You have no right. You're marked, the lead agent said, stepping forward. You're a ghost unit. That program was terminated. You don't exist. Tali raised her hands, not in surrender, but in warning. Carl shouted, Nobody's hurting anyone on my bus. Stay out of this, human, the agent growled. This doesn't concern you. Carl stood from his seat. She's my passenger. That makes it my concern. Before anyone could move, the agent fired a stun pulse toward Tali. But she wasn't there. She had already moved. In a flash, she kicked the weapon from his hand and ducked behind a seat. The other agents rushed forward, but she moved between the seats like a shadow. One was knocked out by a seat bar. Another was disarmed by a twist of her wrist. The passengers screamed and dropped to the floor. Carl opened the emergency back door. Out, he yelled. Everyone out. Tali reached the front, grabbed Carl's wrist, and pulled him to the side. One agent fired at them but missed. The window shattered. Tali pulled Carl down the steps and into a side alley. He gasped, trying to catch his breath. They had stun guns. They tried to kill you. No, she said. They tried to silence me. Carl looked back. Smoke rose from the bus. One agent was still inside, calling for backup. We have to go, she said. But that's my job, Carl whispered. Not anymore, Tali said. Now, your job is staying alive. They ran down the alley, dodging behind trash bins and broken signs. Carl's thoughts spun in chaos. Everything had happened so fast. One moment he was driving. The next he was running for his life, with a woman who wasn't supposed to exist. When they reached a broken gate, Tali stopped. We can't go back. Carl nodded. Then where? She pointed up. A transport drone floated above. Unlocked, unused. We fly. Carl stared at her. Can you even drive that thing? She gave the tiniest smile. No. But you can. Carl blinked. What? You're a driver, aren't you? She said. He laughed, even through the fear. Yeah, just not usually in the air. They jumped in. As the drone lifted off, Carl looked down at the city. He wasn't just a bus driver anymore. He was part of something bigger now. Something dangerous. Something worth fighting for. The drone hovered above the ruined industrial zone before landing inside a large, hollow building. Rusted beams, shattered windows, and half-broken machines surrounded the place. Carl stepped out slowly, eyes wide. Where are we? Tali walked ahead without speaking. Her small frame moved like she had walked this path many times before. This used to be a warehouse, she said. Now it's a ghost shelter. Carl followed her past old crates and flickering lights. At the far end, she opened a door. Inside was a dim room filled with maps, data chips, and broken gear. This wasn't just a hideout, it was a command post. Carl looked around. You've been living here? Since the betrayal, she said quietly. She placed a cracked tablet on the table. A hologram blinked to life, showing the faces of different alien commanders marked with red lines across them. Who are they? Carl asked. Tali pointed at one face. This one? She was my commander. She promised we'd be protected. Another face. He said our size didn't matter. Another. He trained us. Gave us hope. Carl saw her eyes flicker. Her voice cracked. They gave the kill orders. Carl sat down slowly. You were betrayed by your own people. Tali nodded. The ghost unit was winning. We were too fast, too clever. The council feared we'd become a threat. They called us unstable. They marked us and left us behind. Carl stared at the mark on her hand. The scar meant more than pain. It meant she had been erased. They said we were unfit to live among them, that we would weaken the bloodline. Carl's hands curled into fists. That's not just betrayal. That's genocide. Tali sat down beside him. For the first time, she looked tired, not physically, but deep inside. I survived. Others didn't. I found the ones they threw away, orphans, injured, rejected. I taught them to hide, to survive. But hiding isn't living, Carl. He nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time to stop hiding. She looked at him sharply. You don't understand. If we're seen again, they'll erase us all. Not just me. The children too. Carl stood up and paced. So what do we do? Let them keep living in the shadows? Let them believe their mistakes? Tali whispered, what choice do we have? Carl turned toward her. His voice steady. We fight. She raised an eyebrow. You're just a driver. I was, he said, stepping closer. But I'm also a man who's seen good people suffer. I've seen you fight. I've seen you protect. And I've seen the kids. They need more than hiding. They need a chance. Tali looked down. Her fingers brushed the cracked floor. Even if we fight, she said softly, we have nothing. No weapons. No support. No allies. Carl smiled faintly. You have me. She looked up at him. And maybe, Carl added, there are others like me. Tired of watching cruelty, tired of staying quiet, she stood slowly. Something changed in her eyes. A flicker of hope. A fire long buried. I don't want to start a war, she said. Then let's start a movement, Carl replied. Let's help the ones who are always left behind. Tali walked to a locked metal box in the corner. She opened it. Inside were several strange bracelets, each one glowing faintly. These were made for ghost units. They enhanced speed, focus, and memory. I kept them hidden. For a day like this, she handed one to Carl. He hesitated. I'm no warrior. No, she said, placing it on his wrist. But you're something rarer. A human who sees what others won't. The bracelet clamped gently around Carl's wrist. A soft light pulsed once. He didn't feel stronger, but something in him felt sharper. More aware, Tali nodded. Then we begin. That night they gathered the children. Carl stood before them and spoke with simple words. We're not weak, he said. We're not broken. We are the ones who were forgotten, but not anymore. The children looked up, eyes shining with something new, hope. And as the old warehouse lights flickered above them, Carl and Tali stood side by side, two strangers from different worlds, getting ready to change everything. A week passed. The city above kept moving, fast, loud, blind. But beneath it, in tunnels and ruins, something small was waking up. Carl's bus was gone now. He didn't report to the depot anymore. He didn't wear the driver's badge. Instead, he wore the bracelet Tali gave him, the mark of the forgotten. Tali had changed too. She was no longer hiding. She walked taller, eyes steady, shoulders firm. She still spoke little, but her silence now felt like strength. They had started something. At night, Carl and Tali took turns sneaking through old stations and forgotten roads. They found others, old veterans, crippled engineers, abandoned hybrids, and silent outcasts who had been left to rot in the shadows. Most had lost hope, until Tali stood before them and said the same words each time. You are not weak. You were left behind not because you failed, but because they feared your strength. And then Carl would speak. I'm just a human bus driver. But even I can see that none of you deserve to be forgotten. They didn't promise war. They offered something rarer, dignity. They turned an old train station into a camp. Carl fixed lights using scrap parts. Tali trained small groups in movement, defense, survival. The children followed her like shadows, copying every motion. One alien teen with half a faceplate asked Carl one night, "Why do you help us?" Carl smiled and answered, "Because someone helped me once when I thought I was nothing." The camp grew. One day, an ex-medic named Pharaoh arrived, carrying a small child in her arms. The child had mechanical legs that didn't work. I heard about a place where broken people are not trash, Pharaoh said. Is this it? Tali looked at her and simply replied, Yes. Pharaoh stayed. She began teaching others how to fix implants, heal wounds, and create new tech from junk. Even the children helped. They painted symbols, a circle inside a triangle on walls, broken drones, and even old helmets. It became their sign, their promise. The city began to notice. It started small. Rumors, whispers, people talking about a ghost camp in the ruins, about a short alien girl leading a group of misfits, about a human who gave up everything to help her. Then came the news drones. One flew near the station and captured images. Children learning to fight, old machines running again. Forgotten aliens smiling for the first time. The video went viral. It was watched across planets. But not everyone liked it. At the Galactic Security Hall, Officials argued. She was marked erased, one officer said. This is rebellion. She's teaching unity, another replied. We can't silence that without backlash. They're not citizens, the first snapped. They're leftovers, but the images kept spreading. So did hope. One night, Carl sat with Tali under the half-broken roof. Stars blinked above them. You realize, he said quietly, they'll come for us soon. Tali nodded. They always do. But this time, Carl added, we won't be alone. She looked at him. Do you regret it? He shook his head. Every day I drove past people I never saw. Now I see everything, she didn't reply. But she reached into her coat and handed him a small item. A broken driver's badge, bent and scratched. I found it, she said. Thought you'd want it back. Carl stared at it, then slowly he snapped it in half and dropped it into the fire. That part of me is done, he said. Now I'm driving something much bigger. They both sat in silence, the fire warming their faces. In the distance, a group of new arrivals appeared, young, old, alien, human, all carrying bags and tired eyes. Carl stood up. They keep coming. Tali stood beside him. Then we keep building. And behind them, the once-abandoned camp glowed with life, laughter, and silent strength. The forgotten were no longer hiding. They were rising. The sun rose over the ruined part of the city, turning broken glass into gold. For once, the forgotten part of the world felt alive. Inside the rebuilt station, hundreds of eyes waited. Tali stood in the center of the gathering. Her short frame looked even smaller next to the tall aliens and machines around her. But everyone stood behind her. Carl adjusted the strap on his shoulder. It held a tool bag, but today it looked more like armor. They're coming, said Pharaoh, the medic, looking at the blinking radar on a repaired console. Ships, big ones. Tali didn't flinch. Let them. From above, the sound of engines filled the air. A silver transport hovered low, and galactic peace officers in black armor dropped down. 5, then 10, then 20. They marched in silence, faces hidden under shiny helmets. Their leader, a tall alien in silver armor, stepped forward. This camp is illegal, the officer shouted. You are harboring erased citizens and banned technology. Tali walked forward alone. This is not a camp, she replied. This is home, the officer raised his arm. You are a marked unit. You have no right to form armies or groups. These are not soldiers, Tali said. They are survivors. Disperse now, the officer ordered. Or we will use force. Carl stepped beside her. Then you'll have to hurt me first. One by one, others stepped forward. Pharaoh, the children, the wounded, the old. Even a boy in a wheelchair rolled up, holding a sign that read, We exist. The officers paused. They had come to arrest criminals. But what they saw were families, friends, children holding hands, broken robots standing beside tired farmers. The officer looked confused. We were told this was a rebel force. We are not rebels, Tali said. We are the forgotten, the rejected, and we're not hiding anymore. At that moment, drones flew above, news drones. The crowd had broadcasted everything, across planets, across networks. Billions were watching. And for the first time, they saw the truth. A short alien woman standing tall, a human beside her and behind them, those whom society had thrown away. The officer stepped back. He looked into the camera drone and said, We need orders, but no orders came because the people were watching. And they were angry. Messages flooded the networks. Let them live. They deserve rights too. She's a hero, not a threat. Carl, the bus driver, saved them. We stand with the forgotten. The officer's communicator buzzed. A voice said, Withdraw. Now. He gave one last look at Tali, then raised his hand. The officers backed away, climbing into their ship. Moments later, they were gone. Silence filled the air. Then, cheering, children laughed. Old aliens cried. Carl exhaled deeply and sat down on a crate, shaking his head. Tali looked at him. We stood, he smiled, and the galaxy stood with us. Later that night, Carl sat by the fire, watching the children paint the triangle and circle symbol on a wall. Tali joined him quietly. You know, he said, I never thought my old bus would lead to this. Tali chuckled softly. You never drove people. You drove change. He looked at her.
What now?
She gazed up at the stars. Now, we build something better. He nodded. Together. Suddenly a small hand tugged at Carl's sleeve. It was the boy in the wheelchair. He held up a piece of paper with crayon marks. It was a drawing. Carl driving a bus full of aliens with Tali standing on top of the roof holding a glowing staff. Above them the words, "Our heroes." Carl blinked hard and looked away. Tali touched his arm gently. "You gave us roads when we had none. And you," Carl whispered, "taught us how to walk again." The fire crackled softly. In the distance, a new day waited. The forgotten were forgotten no more, and their journey was just beginning.